Hello, and welcome to the online Graduate Research Forum for Spring 2016. My name is Sylvia Miller, and I will be your presenter today. I am a graduate student in the Masters of Science in Disciplinary Studies program in the Department of Occupational, Workforce, and Leadership Studies. The title of my professional practicum is New and Transitioning Fire and Emergency Services in Texas. The purpose of my practicum is to consolidate information for new and transitioning communities in Texas who need to develop fire and emergency services by providing valid resources and information from all of the pertinent associations and agencies. The location of my practicum was at the Texas Commission on Fire Protection, with Mark Roughton as my practicum supervisor, who is the agency's public information officer. I chose this for my practicum project because, as everyone knows, Texas is growing very fast. The agency's mission to be proactive for firefighter safety falls in line with the ability to synthesize information on a wider scale for new and transitioning communities and to be an advocate for training, whether it is legally required or not, that will save lives, property, and provide applicable information for all the stakeholders involved. During my practicum, I have attempted to identify the advantages for implementing structured services that is connected to funding and resources that can be built upon as the population grows in any community in Texas. In my effort to do this, I applied working knowledge of policies, procedures, and information for other state and federal agencies relevant to emergency services for new and transitioning communities. I collaborated with local, county, and state emergency service leaders to inform and recommend services. I organized, guided, and managed a community group implementing emergency services and attempted to articulate and advocate for changes to policies relevant to evolving local communities. Imagine that you found your perfect dream home in a rural area, but it caught on fire, or you needed an ambulance, but there was no one to call, or they were too far away, so they took too long to get there. During my practicum, I was overwhelmed with the amount of information needed to learn for new and developing emergency services, but I will attempt to hit the highlights. In addition to state government agencies, associations in the industry like Safety and SFMA and the Texas Forest Service play crucial roles in the development of new and transitioning services for communities. The Texas State Association of Fire and Emergency Service Districts and the State Firemen's and Fire Marshals Association are very important organizations for the volunteer fire departments and emergency service districts in Texas. Both of these associations offer their members access to training, grants, and legislative representation for laws that affect emergency services in Texas. The Texas Forest Service, which is part of the Texas A&M system, is also very important for volunteer fire departments because they offer grants for training, protective clothing, and equipment, in addition to mutual aid throughout the state for rural areas. Volunteer fire departments can work with water districts, unincorporated areas, or emergency service districts. Volunteer fire departments do not typically provide EMS. Volunteer fire departments contract with unincorporated areas of county governments and water districts. It must be a nonprofit organization that is run by a board of directors, and communities can also create emergency service districts that contract with volunteer departments to provide emergency services, and then they can also transition to a paid department. Training, recruitment, and retention are the most important issues for volunteer fire department personnel. Local control in Texas is everything. Training, recruitment, and retention are huge issues for volunteer departments. There are not any state laws in Texas that require volunteers to have any mandatory training. While attempting to guide an emergency community, While attempting to guide an emerging community, I found that the decisions regarding the types of training, recruitment, or retention strategies were all made locally. This also meant that they do not have background checks done on any of their volunteer personnel. My practicum supervisor pointed out that it is a very touchy subject politically in Texas. So now I will move on to my literature highlights. My first literature resource is the State Association of Fire and Emergency District website. They have excellent resources that can be viewed on their website that talk about emergency service districts. ESDs are political subdivisions that are considered independent government entities and not an extension of the county government. They are created by a petition signed by at least 100 voters in the district. It's presented to their county commissioner's court, and if it's approved, there is an election so voters can create the district. ESDs can provide both fire protection and emergency medical services. They are often the first option for developing new services, and they often transition to paid departments. The formation of an ESD district also can result in better ISO ratings within the district, which means lower insurance premiums for businesses and homeowners. My second literature resource contains an article that discusses the increasing number of departments that are transitioning to paid services. The article talks about the stretched resources for volunteer fire departments in Texas, and it has information quoted from the executive director of the State Firemen's and Fire Marshals Association that reiterates my practicum purpose and also demonstrates the impact of the SFMA Association for volunteer fire departments in Texas. It also talks about the benefits of training and how the types of services available in a community can impact the cost of insurance for their area. And finally, my last literature reference is about the lessons learned from the explosion that occurred in the city of West Texas a few years ago. In the article, it goes over many issues, but the main one is that the volunteer firefighters in that area did not have a standard operating procedure in place, and they did not have enough training to know how to fight a fire of this magnitude that involved hazardous materials with explosive properties that is very different from a typical structure fire. It highlights the need for possible required training, but it also highlights the need that the training has to be specific for the area that the services are being provided to. This brings me to my SWOT reflections that I experienced during my practicum. In addition to my strengths that I talked about in the forums during this course, my practicum supervisor pointed out that I have the ability to recognize the need for my practicum project, which involves seeing the big picture and leadership abilities. My site supervisor and I also both agreed that my weakness is my organization and time management. I have taken many classes and training to help me develop better organizational skills and time management habits, but obviously I am still struggling with those issues. The opportunities during my practicum were definitely networking. During my practicum, I made contact and interviewed the executive director of the Texas Fire Chiefs Association, Betty Wilkes, a program manager at the Texas Department of Health and Human Services, and Chris Barron, the executive director of the State Firemen's and Fire Marshals Association. All of these contacts were very informative for my practicum project. And finally, the threat that I experienced was the realization that even though I have worked really hard to advocate and develop a clear process for change in the industry, real change happens legislatively, and it is very political. As far as my future career plans go, after I graduate, my hope is that I will be promoted to a higher level management position with my current employer, but there is no guarantee. I am planning to retire from my current position in the fall of 2017 and continue working in another position. My plan is to apply for executive level management positions or even an executive director's position. I have also considered consulting, but I'm not really sure how that would work. Hopefully, with my work experience and now my education, I will be able to transition to my next career in one of those type positions. I prefer to remain cautiously optimistic about my next career and hope for the best, but also be prepared and persistent to continue learning and advancing my career. On the YouTube page below, please indicate your anonymous preference for this practicum by clicking one of these two icons. Also, please post your comments or questions in the YouTube comment section below. I will respond to your inquiries posted between April 6th and 17th through this webpage.